So, hi everyone. So thanks everyone for joining this meetup. So we'll get started then. So we have like 4 talks. Uh, 1 second. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. So I have some more tabs open. So sorry for the confusion. Anyway, so we have like 4 talks today, and our first speaker is Ishwar, and he's working in Flipkart, and he will be talking about web performance and declarative UI. So without any further delay, I'll invite Ishwar. Hi Ishwar.
Yeah, hi Kiran. Hope my screen is visible.
Yes, yes, yeah. You can get started.
Cool. So, hello everyone. Welcome to the talk, Web Performance and Declarative UIs at Flipkart Ads. Myself, Ishwar. I'm currently working as a UI engineer at Flipkart and mostly working on React.js and GraphQL. And I'm a big time movie buff and I'm a fitness freak and I'm pretty much interested in music also. And so, without getting any further delayed, let's understand the problem statement at hand. So there are two parts to the problem statement: server driven UI and preview generation. So server driven UI in the context of the current problem statement refers to a form wherein the user can input some images and some text, and all of these inputs again, out of these inputs there can be some images generated which we call as the previews. So that is the second part of the problem statement. So just two things. One is a form wherein the user can input some text and images. And out of these inputs, there will be some images again generated. Those are called the previews. That's the second part. So now let's understand what's the server-driven UI in a better way. So it has two key aspects: what to render. This refers to the data that has to be rendered, and how to render. It refers to the spatial arrangement of the data. So by spatial arrangement, we all know that DOM is an NRI tree, right? So wherein each node can have some children, and again, in turn, the child can act as a parent for some other children, and so on and so forth, right? So if we have an NRI tree kind of a JSON structure, so this can be truly translated into a DOM kind of a model, and all the spatial arrangement, like whether they have to be rendered side by side or whether one has to be stacked on top of another. All these can be the metadata in the JSON structure or the JSON representation that we have. So think of an example grid like this, a simple grid. So it has some header on the top, and in the second row we have like three child elements, and then again in the third one is again another normal division, right? So for this, we can represent all of this in a JSON kind of a manner. So in this JSON, we have the first object as it just has the name as the header. It's just a plain JSON object. The second one is slightly complex. It's not as straightforward as the first JSON. It has a logical operator called true, right? So this means that this is not a straightforward division, but it has some children inside it. It has a nav bar, and it has a content, and it has a sidebar, right? So all of these are children. And again, in turn, this inside this children also, this can be another further tree DOM structure can be present inside this. Okay, so here in the current example, it doesn't have any, and we have a third JSON called the footer. It just has a plain name, right? So like this, we can be able to represent the UI in a JSON representation, something like this. So if you have a JSON like this, you can render this all of this in the DOM, right? So there can be some dependencies also. So when there is a tree DOM like this, right, as represented here. So let's say in the same level, if there are siblings, and when there is dependency between one node on another, right? So even these can be driven with the meta information that can be passed in the JSON. So let's say think of a use case wherein one input field can exist only if the other exists, or something of this format. So all of this can be passed with the help of a server driven UI parser. So basically we can have an orchestrator component on top of all of the divisions, all of the child components, and then we can have on change handlers in the child components, which the parent orchestrator component can listen to, right? So now that we understood what the server driven UI, that is the first part of the problem statement, let's understand the second part of the problem statement, that is the preview generation. So when I said the images and the outputs initially, right, this is what I meant. So basically there is an ad banner that is generated out of the inputs given by the user, so which has this huge blue colored image with the person running in it, and then there is a Nike logo here, and again another logo here. There is a title here, there is another title here, and then there is a terms and conditions apply. Out of this there are up to 5 assets here, right? One background image, logo images, one text and CTA text, and again there is a terms and conditions wala chevron, right? So think of a form which has all these 5 assets on the left side with its own multiplicities. So let's say the background images can be uploaded as 5 in number, and again logos also can be uploaded like 1 and 1, and these texts can be again maybe the user can input up to 3 texts, and again for the second type of text also, if the user can input up to 3 texts, right? The Cartesian product will be, the number of combinations out of this will be large, which in the current case is 5 into 3 into 3, which is 15 3s are 45. So a total number of 45 combinations can be generated out of this, right? And all of these combinations have to be processed in order to produce an output of this kind of a format. So all of the 45 combinations that are generated can be of this format. They have a background image and logos here, and then title and a subtitle, right? So let's have a look at the challenges that are present for this preview generation part. So first challenge is the technology that we'll have to use for this use case. And secondly, multiplicity of each such asset, which is what I have explained. And when the total number of combinations, which in the current use case is 45, if it is this bigger, then how to keep the main thread free is another big challenge, right? So potential solutions. First one is a very simple and rather dumb way. We can generate all the combinations on the main thread itself. But second one is not a simpler way, but it is the recommended way to do the things. So perform operations off threaded. So we need to have some mechanism wherein we have to keep the main thread free from all these massive computations. Allow the user to freely interact with the application. So if you can imagine, when there are text fields and in between each keystrokes, if there is a network call happening, then we shouldn't obstruct the user with any kind of a page loader, so that even before punching in the next keystroke, the user shouldn't be obstructed, right? So for that, we might have to use an API called abort controller to stop the in-flight requests that are happening when the user is making some more changes on top of that, right? So regarding the technology to use, we had to take a choice between, I mean, in order to generate the previews, so whether they have to be in a canvas format or the SVG format is one challenge that we have mentioned earlier, right? So let's have a look at the differences first before finalizing what is the correct one for our use case. So in SVG, it supports accessibility, it supports responsiveness, and it has a navigable DOM. It has a tree of DOM inside it. Canvas doesn't have a DOM. It will be just one HTML element, but what you do inside it will not be affecting the DOM. So accessibility wasn't needed for our use case, so this doesn't matter. The first point doesn't matter. So second one is very, very important. So SVGs operate in a retained mode. Canvas operates in an immediate mode. So what I mean by that is, browser's graphics API creates an in-memory scene of the final output and translates the drawing commands to the browser in the case of an SVG. Canvas does the same, but there is no in-memory scene creation of the final output. This is very important. So the in-memory scene creation won't be present for a canvas, so that the no extra memory is required for canvas, but there is some in-memory space required for SVG. So SVGs doesn't support any extended use cases, but Canvas support extended use cases like pixel manipulation, etc. Because Canvas is a raster based image and SVGs are generally composed of paths, right? So that's why out of these we had to choose Canvas for our use case, as it suits the use case better, as we have to generate the previews by just painting. But it's not that SVG is better or Canvas is better on top of anything, but it's just that the current use case Canvas suits better, right? So what's a canvas? So the best way to understand canvas is like a drawing board, right? So you have a drawing board like this, and canvas is a HTML element, and it represents a whiteboard mostly used for drawing, and it affects the paint and the recalc step in the browser render cycle, right? So what is the render context for canvas? So we have a query selector for the canvas, and then we get the context for that canvas by passing in either 2D, or this can be 3D also for APIs like WebGL and all. So how the best way to understand the render context of a canvas is this paintbrush over here. So we have the canvas board, and we use this paintbrush to just scribble on the canvas board. We have to paint. So with this context, we know what is the color of the paint that we dip this brush into. What is the font style that we want to draw over here? Would I be drawing cursive writing, or would I be drawing small letters or capital letters and all that? Would I be drawing any image or something like that? Right. So these are some common methods that are helpful for drawing on the canvas. When you're dealing with text, these can be some helpful methods. When you're dealing with paths, then these can be some helpful methods. When you're drawing an image, then this is the syntax to do that. So you can pick up the source image ka width and height, and then you can paint it over to the canvas destination coordinates and the height and width. So we had mentioned this also as a problem, right? We want to, if you look at the pictorial representation here, so we want to keep the main thread free from the massive calculations that are happening, right? So if you look at this diagram here, at some point, exactly precisely here, we are offloading the work to some other thread which is doing on itself, and after that, again, at some point in time, it is sending back the data to the main thread at this point, right? So in between these 2 points, the main thread is completely free. Because it has offloaded the work to another thread, right? So like when you use an implementation of a worker thread, then you might not see that weird pop-up which says your page has become unresponsive, please click on the exit pages button to continue, right? So let's have a look at the bookish definition of a worker. So worker is a means to run scripts in the background threads, like I explained here. And with worker, you can perform tasks without interfering with the user interface. And the syntax is pretty much straightforward. You can instantiate a worker like this, and then you can pass the path of the worker file. So there are two methods to keep in mind when you are dealing with workers. So one is the post message, and the other one is the on message. So post message is used to transfer the data from one thread to another, and on message will be the reverse of it. Basically, you listen to the information that is sent from the other threads, right? So now that we have finalized the technology, to be canvas, and we have finalized, we have thought to use worker in order to keep the main thread free. But there is a very, very big challenge here. So worker threads doesn't have access to the DOM, but canvas is a HTML element. So how can we use worker thread scope in order to draw images on the canvas, right? So there is a solution for this, which is off-screen canvas. So as the name suggests, so the drawing capabilities of a canvas DOM element can be separated with the help of a off-screen canvas, right? As this diagram represents. So previously, canvas is a DOM element with its drawing capabilities, but with off-screen canvas, you can separate the drawing capabilities away from the DOM element, so that you can use this drawing capabilities even on the non-main thread environment, right? Yeah, this is what I have explained. At least let me read out the last part for you. So canvas drawing capabilities were tied to the canvas element, which meant it was directly depending on the DOM. Off-screen canvas, as the name implies, decouples the DOM and the canvas API by moving it off-screen. As simple as that. So yeah, now we have all the tools ready. We have finalized the technology. We thought to use the worker thread for the drawing, and then so we have off-screen canvas also for the challenge. So now let's start drawing. But again, we have a few more challenges or optimizations to be made. First part being the loading of the fonts. On the main thread, you basically have a link tag, and then you can use the link tag to point it to a WAF file and then load the fonts basically, right? But on the worker thread, this is a challenge because you don't have access to the DOM, you don't have access to the link element at all. So here you can make use of this font face API. So the syntax looks like this, wherein you can pass the WAV file and then you can load the fonts, whatever font style you want. Right, we are sorted on that, and the text we can, like I told you, we can use context.fillText method in order to write the text on the canvas board. And drawing images. So for this, we have used the method called create image bitmap. Why? Because so on the normal DOM, let's say if you set img space src equals to some image URL, right? What actually happens on the browser is that the browser makes a call to the to get the image. Second step, it has to download the fetched image, and third step, it has to decode the image. So this decoding process is heavier. So let's say if the number of images are bigger, then obviously the time taken to decode will also be higher, right? So that is why in the context of this problem, we had to use create image bitmap, because so this is an easy API for loading image blobs. And with this, we can bypass the decoding that I explained. We don't have to wait for the decoding to complete. The decoding process can happen in the background, but even before that, we get the image bitmap like this. So we can use the image bitmap even before the decode completes, and then we can use this bitmap to draw over the canvas, because canvas supports drawing bitmaps, right? And this resize images, I will explain this now. So when you have to downscale an image from, let's say, a resolution of 800 to 200, right? I mean 800 into 800 into 200 into 200, right? So for this, if you make a direct downscale from 800 to 200 directly, right, the results can be somewhat jagged. The output images of that can be somewhat jagged, and it can have sharp format, right? In order to avoid that, we can use this kind of a mechanism, a step downsizing method. So wherein first it will be an 800 cross 800 image, and you downscale it first to 400 cross 400. After that, you downscale it to 200 cross 200. For the current example, there are only 2 steps, but there can be even higher number of steps as well. So why is this step downsizing recommended? So these are the results when you do it without step downsizing and when you do it with step downsizing. So if you observe here, there are some jagged edges here, right? It's all kind of poking to the eyes, right? It's not the case here. The image might be blurred at some places, but it's not poking to the eyes at all, right? So with the help of create image bitmap, you can get results as good as a step downsized image like this, right? So now that we have drawn using all those methods, we have filled the text and all of that. Now we have to extract the images from the off thread, from the worker thread, right? So you can use this method, convert to blob. Using this API, you can extract the image, and then you can communicate from the worker thread back to the main thread using these kind of methods. Post message is a actually behind the screens. Post message by default uses a structured clone algorithm which does a JSON serialization of the data that has to be sent. So now that with the help of this convert to blob, we have a blob, and then if this has to be communicated, we might have to convert it to a base 64 representation of the image, which will be a huge string, right? So if you have to send 45 images which are in base 64 format, then the post, if you have to send that in a post message method, then and if it has to be JSON serialized, then the load can be heavier. So there are couple of alternatives. So you can write into the cache from the worker thread, and again read it back from the cache in the main thread. So this is one effective method. And transferables. So transferables, these only support string buffers. So if there is a way that you can convert the whatever data that you have when you're dealing with worker threads, right? So if you can convert the data into array buffers, then you can make use of transferables, because transferables, they send the data in just like a flash. They copy it very fast. It is like a copy by reference rather than a copy by value. So copy by value is in the case of a post message, but with transferables you can copy by reference. So you can send it, because basically when there are two threads that are communicating, there will be a memory block, the memory location on which these two threads are communicating. So basically when we make use of transferables, then we can transfer the control of that memory block to one thread, and after it does the job, it can transfer back the control to the other thread back. This is how you deal with the transferables. So yeah, now it's the demo time, wherein whatever I've explained till now should make sense now. So this is the form that I was talking about, the form on the left side, wherein you have an option to punch in up to 5 images from the user. There are already 2 uploaded for the sake of demo, but you can use this plus button to upload 3 more. There are 2 logos, and then there can be up to 3 titles here. You can use this add more button to add some more titles, and again there can be up to 3 CTA text also. So there is another toggler button here, just to either enable the terms and conditions on the right side or not. So all of the previews that are generated out of this will be shown over here on the right side on this palette. Okay, so also the dependency in between the assets that I explained earlier, right? That is in between these two, because when you have a primary logo that can be rendered over here and the secondary logo that can be rendered over here, right? So the secondary logo can exist only if the primary logo is existing. Otherwise, if the user crosses the primary logo in this situation, the secondary logo has to get emptied by itself, right? That's what I meant, like when you have dependencies in between assets here. Let's continue this video. So now the user has started punching in some titles here. So this CTA text is also a mandatory field, so that's why you are not seeing any outputs till now. So now that the user has punched in shop now here and sponsored by Nike. So what exactly happened in the background? We have generated the Cartesian product, which is 2 images into one, which is 2 into 1 into 1. So we have 2 combinations. That's why we have one with this background image and the second one with the second background image. So this is the second image, right? So now the user is continuing to add one more CTA text here. So there is no page level loader like I explained. There is only one blue loader that appears at the top. So in between, if there are any network requests that happen, they will be aborted basically. So why is there a network call? The network call is to get the coordinates of where we have to place the logo, where do we have to place the text and all. So now that he has punched in another title called Great Deals, so there will be this image that is combined with this title and this CTA text. Again, this combined with this title and the second CTA text. So those are 2 combinations. And the next one, this image again, it combines with these 2 CTA texts and the title and these 2 logos. That's why we have 4 combinations in total. Let's have a look at how those look like. Right. Cool. So again, the user can choose to change something, and then he can maybe toggle this terms and conditions, which can remove this text or not, right? So that is pretty much it in order to generate the previews from the server-driven UI fashioned form. So these are actually live in action. So if you look at the Flipkart application, right, on the home page, you can see ads like this. So this is an ad banner that is generated out of the current problem statement. So we had a boat logo and there are 2 titles, and then there is a huge background image. And here also there is a similar ad banner. This has the terms and conditions enabled, and then there is a title, there is a logo and all that, right? So yeah, these are my team members, Abhinash and Ishan. These were there for solutioning this problem statement right from the beginning, and then they have come up with pretty much innovative solutions for the optimizations for cracking this problem statement. So thanks for them. And so that's about it. If you guys have any questions, then now is the time to shoot it out.
Hi, Ishwar. Really nice talk, Ishwar. Hello?
Yeah,
Yeah, you can hear me,
thanks,
right?
Kiran.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm able to hear you.
So, yeah, so we have one question. Let me
Hmm.
put that on screen.
Are most ad banners on Flipkart manually generated with some form like this? So there are different kind of ad formats. So let's say if you search for shoes on Flipkart, right? So among the search results, you can see some results with ad on top right corner or sponsored on top right corner, right? So that is a different kind of ad. It just has the product image, right? So not every ad banner is generated like this, but couple of ad formats are generated in a fashion like this. There is a form, and then we generated the previews, and then these go live on the Flipkart website. I hope that answers your question.
Uh, yeah. Um, yeah. So, hello, Karthik. I think you have one question earlier while the talk is happening. Can you clarify? I think the question was not clear.
Mhm.
So, we have one more question. Is WebP support possible?
I didn't understand this question. Is
So,
that
maybe WebP images, I guess.
Uh, currently we are generating the outputs in the regular formats like PNG, and then we make this live. So actually, in reality, the previews that we generated aren't the ones that are going live on the Flipkart website, but actually there is another system. There is another team at Flipkart which actually does the generation for us. But even before that happens, we show to the user that these are the previews generated, and we generate it in a JPEG and PNG formats, and then they go live on Flipkart website.
So, you can also take a look at the
Sure. So,
one more question is, do you have any fallback for legacy browsers?
So actually, amongst the APIs that we used, something like Offscreen Canvas and Create Image Bitmap, right? So these are supported in many of the browsers, but in some browsers which don't support these, we have we have some polyfills to manage that. So like I can share them offline with you. So there are like up to 10 or 15 lines of snippets of code which can manage that, even though the browser don't support that. So that's how we are dealing with this problem at hand. So downsizing of the image is happening in front end or back end. So currently, the step downsizing that I explained is not exactly the one that we tried the with the help of step downsizing, but create image bitmap, that the API that we used actually gives better results than step downsizing. So we resorted to that. So like I mentioned, right, these are the client side previews that are shown to the user or the advertiser, but these are not exactly the ones that will be live on the Flipkart homepage. So these are just the previews. So at this point in time, the downsizing is actually done by the create image bitmap internally.
Great. So we have one more question from Sheva.
Hmm.
How
How
do
do
you
you
define
define
different templates
different
for?
templates for the banners? So this is one kind of a banner wherein we have this requirement from the product saying that there can be one logo at the left and one logo at the right, because these mostly appear on the home page of the Flipkart. So like there are some other ads like I mentioned earlier, right, which appear in the search results of the search pages, right? So for this we have this template. So for this we basically have that. Like I told you, right, when the user is changing each keystroke on the titles, or when he's changing the images, so we get some configuration to be in order to draw the image also. So we get some configuration saying that the primary logo, the first logo should be somewhere on the top left, from 10 pixel from the top and 10 pixel from the left. The secondary logo should be 1000 pixel from the left and 10 pixel from the top. So we get all this configuration, and that's how we generate. So that the templates actually differ for different ad banners. Yeah.
Great. I think we have one question from Ajay. I think Abhinash is also trying to answer, but you can, if you want, you can also clarify.
Yeah. Why did we generate the network request to get the coordinates? Can't we predefine where the logo should be? So actually, let's say I told you that there can be dependencies in between these assets, right? So when there is only one primary logo and there is no secondary logo, in that case we shouldn't be even having the coordinates for secondary logo, right? So that's why we resorted to this, and we want to stick to the principles of the actual team that generates the final previews. So we make a call to that team to get the coordinates, and we generate the previews. So what in afterwards, if the team changes the configuration that the primary logo should be actually not 10 pixel from the top, it has to be instead 30 from the top, then we don't have to make any changes to the code, right? So that's why we resorted to the sticking to the actual team which generates the previews. So that's why we make the calls that way. So we don't want to change it timely, so that's why we tied to that team for generating the for getting the coordinates and generating the previews.
Great. Yes. I think that's all the questions we have right now. Yeah. Yeah. Then we'll move on to the second talks. Thanks, Ishwar. The talk was really good and really helpful. We'll end it
Thanks.
at how you are using that in Flipkart. Really good, really interesting talk. Um,
Thanks a lot.
if you want, you can also hang out a little bit in YouTube chat. A few people might ask some more questions there.
Sure,
Uh,
sure. Definitely.
yeah, yeah. Thanks for the
Okay,
talk again, and we'll move to the second speaker. So
cool.
our second speaker is Ashta. Let me invite her. Hi, Ashta.
Hi. So, shall I
Yeah,
begin? I'm quite
yeah.
excited
So
for this.
can you, yeah, can you share your screen as well?
Yeah, sure.
So Ashta will be talking about using TypeScript with React.
Yeah,
Uh,
sure. Is the screen visible?
so you yes, you can move to the slides part. Great,
Yeah, sure.
sure. You can get started,
So,
Ashta.
yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm Astha, and I have been working with React for over a year now. And I want to introduce you all to TypeScript and how to get started with using TypeScript with React. So, let's begin. So there are certain prerequisites for you to take the most out of this talk. So let's go through them first. So I expect familiarity with React, and that is all because React is a JavaScript library. So I expect React and JavaScript. And this is the structure of the talk. So first we'll be going through the basics of TypeScript, because I don't expect you to know TypeScript, and we'll be going through this together. One point that I need to make here is that this is going to be non-exhaustive. That is, I'm going to cover most of the things that are going to be used generally by you. But then there's always more, so you can look that up later. And after that, we'll jump to using TypeScript with React. So let's get started with TypeScript basics. Okay. So the first thing that I want to talk about is variables, right? We use variables all the time. So you can declare constant variables in JavaScript also, and so all the things that you can do in JavaScript, you can do them in TypeScript, but there are certain benefits. So I'll go through them and all the things that you can do here. So the first thing that I want to talk about is constant variable. So for example, this is a constant variable that you have. Now you want to make sure that you do not override this with any other value. So for example, if you do something like this later on, TypeScript is going to catch this for you without you even running the code. And this is very important because in JavaScript, so I have a JS file here. So for example, I have a value 12, and now if I try to do this 15, it does not get mad at me. And until and unless I run the code, it does not tell me that there's something wrong with it. Uh, Once I ran the code, it told me that, hey, you are trying to reassign a value to a constant variable. So that's a benefit that you get here. The other thing is that you can also declare variables that can change due course of time with the help of let. So for example, this is 1 and later I want to make it to 2. But what is happening in TypeScript is that it's type checking with JavaScript. So TypeScript is basically JavaScript with static type checking. So what's happening here is that it has implicitly realized that this variable is of type number. So I can only put numbers in here. So for example, if I try to do something like this, it's going to get mad at me. It's going to tell me that type string is not assignable to type number. And there's one more quick tip. I think hover is really very helpful when you're working with TypeScript. The messages are very clear and they tell you what exactly is wrong. So this is not something that you can do. Now, in both of these examples, right, TypeScript actually inferred the type for us. What if we want to declare a specific type? You can do that as well, which is like this. So you can tell it that, so this is a syntax. So you can say that this is going to be a string. And now if you try to do something like this, it's going to get mad at you. The other thing is, which is really interesting, is that the type checking is kind of strict, like which is important as well. For example, in languages like C++, right, if you try to print if you try to print true, you'll get 1, and if you try to print false, you'll get 0. That is, it's okay if you just check 1 or 0, but here that's not the case actually. If I decide that this variable is going to be a boolean, I cannot just go ahead and be like, now it's a number. No, that's not how it works. You cannot assign a number to a boolean. Similarly, if it's 1, I cannot assign true here. So this kind of type checking is done by TypeScript for me. So that's kind of interesting. So we did cover variables. Next up is objects. We use objects a lot. So I thought we might go over them as well. So there are two ways you can declare objects. So one is when you're declaring them on the fly. So I just declared a key value pair here, and again this was implicitly inferred. The type of the object, say, it tells me that A is a number and B is a string. Right, this is something that TypeScript does for me, and I cannot do something like this. So there is no property P that I declared here. So TypeScript is telling me that, hey, there is no property P and something's wrong here. Whereas JavaScript does not do that for me. Let's just simply copy this only. And if I try to do something like this, and now if I want to do .p, for example, JavaScript is not mad at me and it will print something if I run this file. Let's see what it does for me. Oh wait, we still have an error here. So yeah, So it says undefined. Now you might have seen this, you might have even actually experienced this, that sometimes you access a property that is not there, and then on the website when you go for checking, you say, oh, undefined, where did that come from? So these are the kind of problems that you might face, whereas TypeScript just catches them on the fly for you. The other thing is that, so here this was inferred by the language for you, but you can also declare. So for example, I can say cat type, and this is going to be the name, age, breed, whatever, and then I can uh, certainly access the type. So this is something called interface. So interface is a type alias, which you'll be using a lot. So this basically is a type. So for example, if I say const high, uh, this is going to be a string, for example. um, there's something is equal to. So for example, here I tell that this is the type. So similarly, if I want a type something like this, which is an object, there are multiple key value pairs, so I can declare that with the help of interface. And this is how I can assign values and use that type. uh, and again, you cannot access a type that does not exist, because it just tells you that hey, the property pos does not exist. So that is there. Also, you cannot tap into types that do not exist. So for example, here it very specifically tells me that there's no such thing as doc type. Whereas if you were to do something very fishy here in my JS file, for example, if I'm trying to say uh, greeting dot hello, there is nothing called greeting in this file, and definitely not a property hello. But if I try to run this, it'll run for me and it'll say that this is undefined. So that is another thing. Now what I want to talk about is functions. So you're going to use functions as well a lot of the time. So this is an arrow function. You can also use this type, which so arrow functions came in ES6, but you can also use this syntax. I generally prefer arrow functions. So what you do here is you define the types uh, of the variables, that of the parameters that you're going to take in, and then you can say what you're going to return. What happens with this is that you cannot do something like this, like you cannot simply give in a string to the function, because it expects numbers like this. And similarly, you can define a type. So for example, I have a multiply function type. A is a number, B is a number, and it returns a number. And then I can use again the same syntax to say that this is the type. In fact, what would be better is that if I call this numfunc, that is a numerical type of function that would take two numbers and return two numbers. So for example, and return a number, sorry. So for example, if I wanted to do something like this, and I say p comma q, and this one returns p plus q. So it works, and that's cool because we're using the same type. So that is also there. That's something you can do. The other thing is, so you might be wondering that, hey, what if I want this to be a string or a number? What if I want both the types? What if I want more than one type? How do I do that? Well, TypeScript allows you to do that as well, and this is called the concept of unions. So you can have a type something like this. So what this tells TypeScript is that, hey, the num string variable can either be a number or it can be a string, but no other type is allowed. So for example, if I do boolean, it'll get mad at me because that's not allowed. That is something that can also be done. And other thing is any. So this is something that is like JavaScript. For example, you can assign a variable any kind of type. So here, if you tell that anything is any, it means that you can assign it a number. And when I mean number, I mean a number that is an integer or a decimal number. Both are allowed. Or string or boolean, it can be a function, it can be anything, as the name suggests. And there is another thing that happens. So for example, if I write a function and I do not tell what the parameters are going to have the type as, so what happens is that it infers for me. It says this is going to have any type. So I can pass in anything here. But for example, if I say no, this can be string only, the other can be of any type. So then it gets mad when I try to pass in numbers. So that is other thing. So those are all the things that I wanted to cover for TypeScript basics. Of course, there's a lot more, but this is more than enough for us to get started. In the presentation, I have some snippets for you to go through. Don't worry, I'll share this presentation and you can always refer to them. So the next thing that I want to talk about is actually using TypeScript with React. So let's get started with that. I already have a project that can handle TypeScript. So the thing is that you'll have to have your project be able to handle TypeScript. Now, how to do that? So either you can use a boilerplate. So with Create React App, you can use this command and directly you can use a boilerplate. And I would recommend this when you're starting out. But if that is not the case, if you're, changing your project, if you already have a project in JavaScript and you want to now convert it to a TypeScript project for static type checking and all the benefits that you get with it, you can go to this link. This is actually official documentation from Create React Apps, and you can see how you can set up TypeScript in your React app. So let's see. The first thing that I want to talk about is this. This is something that is new here, and again, it's a type. So what is React.fc? If this were not here, this was your regular component. But this is here, and what this does is this tells everyone. This announces that hey, this is a functional component, and that is what this type is. This type reacts give this to us. So React.fc is a functional component. Now the other thing is that we have this card thing going on here, and I'll show you how this looks. This is how this looks. This is the card and there are some props going on. So let's actually see what's happening. So let's go to the card file. So everything looks normal here. Like apart from React.fc, it's basically JavaScript. Like there's no much difference that you can see as such. But in card.tsx, you'll be able to see the differences. Oh, and one more thing that I missed. So you can see that there's a difference of the file extensions. So when you have a regular TypeScript file, it's a .ts extension. But if you want to have JSX elements, then you need to have a .tsx extension. So that is there. Now here the action begins. So the card is actually this thing. This is the card that we have, and let's see what's going on. So we have some props. So we do use props in our components, right? So for example, there are a lot of things here. So you can declare an interface at the top, and the general practice which is good is to actually say what kind of props this is. So these are card props. I have a name and I have an age. What I do here is that React.fc, this is the type, and it's going to take these card props. And then I use them as is, like regularly, the way you do. What's interesting is that what this gives me is that now, for example, it might happen that I forget to give this prop. Now TypeScript is showing me some errors. It's saying property name is missing. It's already telling me that this has happened, which does not happen with TypeScript. It does not tell me that I've missed a prop, whereas TypeScript does that for me. And there's one more thing that you can do, which is quite interesting. So you might say that I want my code to be modular and I don't want to create, another component just because I want to maybe have a property color here. Right, and I totally agree. So TypeScript, it allows you to declare optional optional props. So you can just say optional properties. This is an optional property now. So with this question mark, it has become an optional property. So now if I don't pass color, TypeScript is not mad at me and I can pass it as well. And let's see what other things this can do for me. So for example, I use it here and I say I like your favorite color, um, and let's say which is, and so if this is not there, and if I just simply say color here, then this might be undefined, right? But that is not what something I want. I want this to be like, if it is there, then I want this, otherwise I don't want this. So what you can do here is that if someone passes you this prop, so what you can do here is you can write some TypeScript here. So if color is there, then I want to say which is, um, otherwise I don't want to say anything, so maybe just an empty string. And now if I don't pass anything, you can say I like your, you can see that there's I like your favorite color. But now if someone passes this, you can see now that which is pink is now visible. So you can do all those things here. So you can pass this also, not pass this also, and use this component again and again. So we discussed how to pass props, and how to pass props and how to use these specific components. The other thing that I want to talk about is hooks. You're going to manage a lot of state. So let's talk about that as well. So I have a counter component here. So what it does is it simply counts and thing that I want to talk here is use state. So this is going to be the most used hook in your app, and I would suggest that you practice with types and how to use it. So for example, I so here in the card file, we saw that the interface, it had we had an interface here, right? But in the counter, we did not declare that. So what you can do is, if you don't have much properties, you can simply declare your props here as well. But if there are many of them, then you can create an interface like this. That makes it more readable. But since there was just one prop that I wanted to take, I declared it here itself. Now, what happens is in useState is it infers a type for us. So currently it already tells us that this is a number, and it infers it. So for example, if I now want to show the counter here, thanks VS Code for importing it for me. So again, I'm not passed start. So for example, now I say that start with 2, and let's see how everything looks like. So it works as expected. So what happens is that I'm saying that this is the prop that I want. The type is of number, and I am going to uh, change it on click. Now again, let's do some fun here. Let's make this optional. So for example, if you make this optional, right, now there's some interesting thing that is happening. TypeScript gave me an error here. It says object is possibly undefined. Now this is great, because for example, if you don't pass a prop in some component, everything will break in some cases. But here TypeScript does not let that happen. It tells me that this is possibly undefined, and that I should take care of this, that I should do something about it. So let's do something about it. Let's say that if start is passed, that is, if start is there, then we want to set count to start. Otherwise, let's begin everything from 0. And okay, I still have an error here. Let's see what. Okay, let's try this in. Let's do this here itself, because of course this will not work. I need to do it here only. Set count. Sorry, I need to do it here only in the use state. So if start is there, then I want to use start. Otherwise, I don't want to use start, I will use 0. And now the error is gone because it knows that there is a certainty that a value will be there. If start would be passed, then start would be there. Otherwise, 0 would be there. So, for example, if I don't pass a start value now, then the counter will start from 0 as it does. So we covered a lot of things, and that is all that I wanted to cover. There is again code snippets here, and I will be sharing this presentation so you can have a look at it. These are a few resources that I find really very useful. So when you're just getting started, use these for reference. For example, TypeScript, officially they have this section in their documentation, which is TypeScript for JavaScript programmers. Then there's documentation in for React, where there's a specific part where they show how you can use static type checking with React. And there's also TypeScript handbook, which TypeScript themselves they released it, so you can have a look there as well. And the other thing that I want to recommend, uh, oh, the website open. And the other thing that I want to recommend is this presentation and this talk, and that's about it. What I want to say is, what are you waiting for? It's time to power up your React apps with TypeScript, with static type checking, and have fun, make wonderful things with it. And that's all. Thank you. Connect with me on Twitter and GitHub to stay posted. These are the links. I'll post the presentation somewhere, sometime on my Twitter. So that's all. Thank you.
Nice talk, Ashta.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think we have one question.
What are your views on constructing components using function expression versus trace readable? Yeah, I do think so as well. Function declaration is definitely better way, and so what happens is that uh, I think this really depends on the person who's actually working on the app. You can decide what uh, really makes things more readable for you when you're trying to trace problems. But I think TypeScript really helps a lot in the process. Thanks,
Uh, yeah, we have
Oh,
one more question.
yeah, thanks. It's great that you enjoyed the talk. So what happens is that this question that you asked is even referred in the docs as well. So what the difference? There's not like a lot of difference between type and interface. You can use them interchangeably. Like you can use type for objects as well. But what happens is that with interface you get certain other features which comes up with interfaces. For example, the properties, like if you're accessing different kind of properties in an object, so and auto completion is also that happens with interfaces. So generally it is recommended that when you're using an object, if you're trying to declare types for an object, use interface. Otherwise you can use types as well, so both are like interchangeable. Generally there's like most part there's no difference, but if you want to go more deeper and like exactly see what the nuances are, I would refer you to the docs. They have a page specifically dedicated to this, but to answer there's not much difference, except that interface provides you a lot of different auto completion and other functionalities features. So what happened with so as soon as hooks came up, generally most of the people moved towards functional components, and that's why I covered them in the talk. But what happens is that you can in fact not use react.fc. You can simply, for example, if you have a component, you can simply say export card and not say it's react.fc, and use class as well. Like you cannot so you don't have to declare a specific type for class. You can, in fact, for functional components also you can create it without react.fc. But it's better to do that because now anyone in your code base, they know that this is a functional component or this is a class component. So that's that. I hope that answers your question.
Yes. I think that's all the questions we have for now.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for the nice talk, Ashta. Really enjoyed
Thank
it.
you. Thank you.
I think we got one more. Okay.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, but yeah, other than that, they're pretty similar. But generally, it's recommended that you use. What do you prefer, class components? Or I prefer functional components, but then again, that's a personal preference. I think they're great, but again, it's a personal preference.
Great. Yeah. So if you want, we can also hang out for a while in the YouTube chat, and you can answer if anyone ask more questions. And also how given the link for Ashta in the YouTube description, you can connect with her. You can follow her on Twitter and connect with her if you have more questions. Um, yeah, I think now we'll take a short break, short 5 minute break, and resume the rest of the talks. We'll be back again in 5 minutes. Maybe we'll be back around 3-7 then. So if you want to grab some water or something, stretch a little bit, and we'll be back in 5 minutes.
Thank you, everyone.
Rohit. Rohit. Yeah. So can you share your screen?
Yes, sure. Yeah. Is it
Good.
visible?
Great. Yes.
Okay.
So yeah, hi everyone. So I hope you grabbed some water and took a short break. We'll get started with our next speaker. So Rohit will be talking about using style components with TypeScript. So without any further delay, we'll get started. So Rohit, you can take over.
Thank you, Karan. Yeah. So I'll be talking about using style components plus TypeScript. I expect you to know CSS and React. It's okay if you don't know TypeScript. You will still be able to appreciate uh, style components, but it would be better if you know TypeScript. And if you have seen the previous talk, then it will definitely help. So before that, here is some info on me. I am a COVID coder. That means I started coding in the lockdown last year. I am a final year electronics student and I aspire to be a front-end developer. I'm one of the hosts at Codebook Club. We meet every Sunday at 8 p.m. Indian Standard Time. We are currently reading You Don't Know JS book series by Kyle Simpson. So if you're interested, you can check out Codebook Club on Twitter. Currently, I'm building a product that would change how India reads. I like reading, obviously, then skating and skateboarding too. So before we get into style components, what's wrong with CSS, right? Why do we need another way to write CSS? So let's look into that first. First is lack of scoping. We know that CSS is scoped globally by default, right? Any CSS rule can target any HTML element in the DOM, unlike JavaScript where we have block scope or functional scope. So that's a problem. Then we have dependencies. That is, HTML element can be styled using multiple classes, or uh, a single class can be used to style multiple HTML elements. So over time, we might end up with this spaghetti code, and like where we try to change one thing, and we end up changing 10 other things that we didn't intend to. So that's another problem. Then we have dead code. Dead code is very hard to spot in CSS, and like we have these CSS files that just keep on growing in size. So we have to essentially go out of our way to like remove dead code from our CSS. Then another problem is source order specificity. So if you're building a single page application and you decide to do code splitting on your application, on your CSS files on a per page basis, then the order in which your CSS files load starts to matter. And essentially the CSS file that loads afterwards would have a higher specificity than the CSS file that has loaded before. So you'll have to set up tests to ensure that your UI is rendering as you expected it to be. Then we have dependency on HTML. So HTML and CSS are very related to each other. So often you try to change one thing and then you have to change the other to accommodate the changes. So these are some of the problems that you might face while using CSS. So what can be done? You could use CSS in JavaScript. You can write CSS in JavaScript, which sounds crazy when you hear it for the first time, but I think it will make more sense when we see what style components can do. So let's start coding. So yeah. So So style components is just one way to write CSS in JavaScript, but there are easily 50 plus libraries that allow you to write CSS in JavaScript. You can check out this repo. I'll put this in the chat. So it lists basically all the different libraries using which you can write CSS in JavaScript and the features. So yeah, I'll be trying to clone this Trello homepage landing page because it's a simple enough site to like clone in a short time, and it essentially has all the elements that I need to cover the basics of style components at least. So let's get started. Yeah, so you will need to install style components, and you will need to install the types for style components. Okay, so I have a React application. You can ignore the global styles for now. So where I'm rendering the landing page essentially. So the landing page is just a header and a form. So I've set up the structure and done the wiring already. So I'm rendering header and form. So if we look at header, it's just a div now. So let's go ahead and write our first style component. Okay, so export const style header. So this style prefix is not necessary, but it is good to have, because if you have style prefix, you know this is a style component and not a React component. But it is up to you. So we use style components basically by doing style.div. If you want to render a div, if you want to render a paragraph, you can do style.p. So I'll just do style.div here, and we'll have this. So let's just render this first. Okay, we'll save this. I'll import it here. I can render style header, and then inside the header I'll need two buttons, and I'll need the logo. So I have set up the logo already. So it's just a component. So yep, we have the logo. Then we need two buttons, right? So let's set up two buttons. So this is the shared folder. This is where all the shared components will rest. So button, let's set up a button. So export const style button is equal to style dot button. Here we can set for buttons. We can do background color of. I'll copy the color. I'll paste it here. The color would be white. Let's render this. So I'll export it from my shared. So I'll export it from here, import it in my header. So inside shared style button. So and I can render it here. Style button. So we have a button saying log in. We can have another button which says sign up. Okay, we have this. Now let's style our button a bit. So we can do border none, padding 0.5 and awning, border radius 0.5. Okay, we have that. Then let's up the font size to 1.1. Okay. Then let's take a look at our header, right? So header, we need this to be up. We can make this as a flex. So we can do display flex, and then so we'll need to group these two buttons together. So what we can do is create a container. So this container can be essentially just a div to like group stuff. Wherever we need to group stuff, we can use this container. So we can go to the header, and we have already have the container, so we can just group it in using the container. So have this. Now let's do justify content space between. So, padding 0.5 m, 1 m. Okay. Then okay, so yeah, this now the login button should be the login is a secondary button, right? The sign up is a primary. So what we could do is we can style components allows us to extend the styles basically. So secondary button, here we have style, and instead of rendering a button, I can use the button that we have, style button, and I can override the styles. So when I need the background color to be transparent, right? So let's do that. Background color transparent. I need the color to be blue, right? So the shade of blue. So let's have this. Oh, okay, sorry, I'm not. So let's use this style secondary button. So use this, and you can see it is overriding the styles. You can do so, but style components provides a better way. In this particular case, in case of a button, it provides us a way to dynamically style, and this is probably one of my favorite feature of style components. So what we can do is, let's come this out. Let's go to style button. Here we can use props, and based on the props you can check the button type. So if the button type is secondary, then we'll evaluate the CSS. So this is the function that will just evaluate the CSS that we write. So we can short circuit it because style components is going to ignore undefined, null, and all of that. So we can short circuit it, and we can copy the styles here. So we need these styles, right, for the secondary button. So we can copy them here. And this is where TypeScript will come in. So basically now here we can use the power of TypeScript. So we can do style button props, and we can have button type as so we can keep this optional. Primary, we already have the styles, right? So we just do the secondary one. So it can take two values, primary, or it can be secondary. Okay, and then I can use it here. So yeah, now I can remove this. I don't need that anymore, and I can remove this. We don't need that. And here, let's check. Okay, it's working fine. Here we can tell it the button type is secondary. and it just works. So yep. Now we need pseudo elements, right? We need to do this hover thing. So how do we do that? Let's see. So in button. So first of all, so we can do cursor pointer. Where in secondary button we need the hover pseudo element, right? So we can access that using ampersand. So we can do ampersand hover and write our hover styles here basically. So we can do text decoration underline, and that works. Cool. So then yeah, let's do the form. So we have this. Form is also a div. So let's create a style component for form. So we can have export on style form, and this can be style dot div again, and this will also need display text. We can do justify content between line items, center, margin 0. Let's render form. So style form. Let's render style form. So we have a flex here. Now let's render our image right in that form. Let's render this image. So I have image. Sorry, image component here. It just renders image tag, and I have set up the height. So I'll just go ahead and use that. So style image. And I'll pass the source. I've already imported the hero image. So yeah, we have the image here. So as you can see, the style components will automatically pass the HTML attributes to the DOM. So then what else do we have? We have text, right? So I have this text. Basically, it is just rendering a paragraph. So I can go ahead and use that. So and I need to group this too, right? So we made container, right? A style container. So we can go ahead and use that to group all this. So image will be one, and then the text will be one. So we have styled text, and the style text would be this. Let's just copy this. And here below we'll copy this. So let's take a look. Okay. So we can give our form a width of 80. So now we have the text, but I need this to be a header, right? And not a paragraph tag. So how do we do it? So style components provides us a prop called as, so we can render it as some other element. The styles would be applied, but then it would be rendered as an h1 rather than a p tag. So you can see it is rendered as an h1. Yeah. Then let's do the email and the button. So input, I have this input setup. So export from style email input and style dot input. So here what we could do is create a width maybe of 30 height of 2, and let's render this. So we need to export this style email I'll import it in my form. File email input. Let's render this below. Let's render this below that. And we have this. Let's do type is email place. Okay. Email place folder is email, and yeah, then do something 0.2 order 1 pixel solid padding 1M margin right of 1M padding 0.5 1M. Cool. So we have this. Then let's see our form now. So we are passing the placeholder and the type, right? So type is email. So we have made a style email input. So the type is always going to be an email. It makes sense for the type to be an email. So we'll have to write it again and again. But style components provides us a way to start like define it previously in the style components itself. So let's do that now. So here we can call a method attribute. This can take the props, and then this expects an object in return with your attributes defined. So we can do type email, and we can do dynamic type, dynamic attributes too, like placeholder, and for subject, and for the placeholder we can check if props dot placeholder is passed. If not, then we can set a default one, that is enter your input here. So let's see if that works. We can remove the type email now and let's see. So if I check, we still have the type email. So that is defined in the style component itself. And now let's remove our placeholder. So right now placeholder is email. Let's remove and see if our default one kicks in. So you can see enter your input here. So our default placeholder kicked in. So let's leave that there. Now it's pretty much looking like it. We can add a button. So let's add a button. So we have this button here. We can import. We have already imported it. We haven't. So let's import style button. Style button. Style button. So what to set up? Sign up. It's right. Yep. So okay, cool. We have that. So we saw how to dynamically style our dynamically do the styling using props. Then we can pass the attributes and the dynamic attributes. We can extend our style. We saw right before we did this. We saw we could extend our styles, and the styles that are repeated are overridden basically. So we have this. Then so here. So there are a few things that I would have loved to cover, but I couldn't cover in the interest of time. But I think you should definitely check them out. So one is theming. Theming is cool. You can set up your themes and stuff. So definitely check this out. And then we have security. So this, do read about this. So basically, the props that you pass, they need to be sanitized. Otherwise, you're prone to CSS injection, and yeah, that can be bad. So yeah, so then we have tag template literals. This is very interesting. This is a new feature in ES6. This is how, this is what makes style components possible. There is also this amazing blog on the magic behind style components, so you can read that. Yeah, so I've used this style component to design a sort of a video library. So like what you could do with this is you can have these utility components and your like own kind of mini component library. So you can see like I have a like common container where I have all these properties. So I have height. So if I pass a height, it would use this. Otherwise, it would default to auto. If I pass width padding, it would use that. Otherwise, it would default to some values. And then I have some other properties like position and all. So it will check if that is there. If I've passed that, then it will evaluate the CSS. Otherwise, it would uh, return undefined, and style components will essentially ignore that. So yeah, I have this common container. So basically, most of my other components extend from this because this has all of the properties. So we saw we can extend our style components, right? So I have a flex container. So wherever I need to use flex, I use this flex container directly, and I have extended from my that common container. So it has all of these properties plus it has all these properties, and it will override if any. So if display would have been in linear, it would have overridden it to flex. And the cool thing about this is I don't have to wait and make this, and then after this is ready, I can start using it. I can make this on the go. Like I have made this on the go. So basically, what I do is I was making the app, and whenever I needed something, so JC is justify content. So if I needed justify content space around, I just came here and I added the space around property. So this it has been created on the go without having to like sort of spend dedicate time on it. So yeah, that's about style components. So let's go over what style components does for us once. So uh, so yeah, by style components, right? So it keeps track of all the components that are being rendered on our page, and it will inject only the CSS that is used by that component. So that is good for performance. Then it automatically generates unique class names so that our CSS won't bleed out into other components. So that is nice. Easier deletion of CSS. So as we saw, the styles were grouped with the components itself, right? So if I don't need the form component, I delete it. I delete the entire folder. So the styles also get deleted, and we have that shared folder. So all the reuse styles go there. So it becomes very modular. So usually we don't do like different component for buttons on that, but then using style components, that becomes very modular. I just define one style, one component for button and the stylings, and I was just using that everywhere for the secondary button in the input field and the sign up to. Then uh, dynamic styling. So basically, as we saw, we can use props to dynamically style our components, right? So if we have some user-based styling, so in that case, without style components, we would have to do a lot of heavy lifting to support user preferred styling, but here we can do that very easily. Easier maintenance and a boost in confidence, right? Because everything is structured so well. So basically, you know what you're changing, and you know keyboard you're gonna affect. So that is very nice, and you can be confident about the changes you make. Then yeah, I would like to give a shout out to NeoGCam. and Tanay Pratap for his constant guidance and support. I attended the boot camp, so it has been a total game changer. Yeah, I would love to hear from you if you want to discuss anything about study components, or if you want to discuss anything about front end like React, JavaScript, then you can reach out to me on Twitter or LinkedIn. Uh, yeah. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed the talk.
Nice talk, Rohit.
Thank you again.
So, so if you have any questions, you can ask now.
Thank you, Fena.
Yeah, I think we don't have any questions yet. So you can also hang out a little bit for
Yeah,
a
sure.
little while in the YouTube, and if there are any questions, you can answer there.
Yep, sure.
So yeah, we will move to the next talk then. So
Yeah.
once again, thanks for the nice talk, Rohit.
Thank you.
See you again. Yeah. Hi, Devat. Are you ready?
Hi everyone.
Uh,
Let me just share
yeah.
my screen.
Yes.
Okay, is my screen visible?
Yes. Yes. We can get
Okay.
started.
Okay, so hi everyone. I'm Daivat. Today, I hope I can give my 2 bits on how to develop and test React components in isolation. We'll be focusing on how to mainly write reliable React components which can be reused and make your life easier. So yeah, let's just get this out of the way. Just the 2 bits about me. I'm a 20-year-old developer from Surat. I love TypeScript. I love React. I love contributing to open source projects. Okay, now let's start. Um, Writing front end code is not actually that much of a difficult task. A lot of people can make websites using React and all that, but writing actually reliable front end code is not easy, and it's often looked like people almost ignore it at this point. People almost test their UIs by just clicking around, see if everything is working. That's fine, but as a human being you can't possibly cover all the edge cases that might be there in your UI. So when you test your UI by just clicking around stuff and testing if everything is working fine, it might seem that everything is working fine, but you just never know when it blows up because you didn't test it. It was not automated. So we have computers, so let's just use them. Okay, so writing tests and following this method of writing components, make sure they're tested, make sure they work together well, make sure they work wherever you use them the way you expect them to, gives you lots of confidence, and it just improves the reliability of all the websites you build. And if the projects you build are not reliable, I don't see the point. Okay, now let's just look at this website. So the core idea behind my talk today is the component driven development. So like the name suggests, it is focused on components. So this methodology, you can call it focuses on one component at a time. You start small. You don't start by building out huge pages. You don't start like put a button and then a text, and No, start by building primitive components, start by building buttons, start by building something like an input. It can be really simple. Just start small, then you combine them, and then you combine them into your pages, and then you actually integrate all of these pages into your project. It sounds simple enough, but let's see why it is useful. So I've taken this screenshot from their site as well because they explain it so well that I could not do a better job. So the first of all, it improves the quality of your code. When you develop components in isolation, they are independent from each other. They are meant to be independent from each other. They should do what they're supposed to do in all the different scenarios. It should not happen that you created a button and it behaves differently on two different pages, given that the configuration is the same. The durability of the code will increase because let's say a bug pops up in your code. Even if you are doing test driven development or component driven development, it's not like you are not never going to face bugs. There will be some edge cases because after all you are the one writing the tests. Sometimes you may write tests which may have logical errors, which may not cover all possible cases. So in these cases, when a bug pops up, you can just go down the hierarchy and pinpoint exactly which component is causing your UI to break. If you are not following the component based approach, this might get very dirty because it can be really difficult to find out which part of your UI is either throwing a logical error or even worse, breaking your styles. This can improve the speed and efficiency of your team. If you're working in a team, especially this allows you to work on different parts of your design system, you can call it, and you can share the load between your different team members. So like I said earlier, these components are independent from each other. So if one person is working on let's say one set of components, another person can work on another set of components. Because they are independent. They don't care about each other's existence. You can just work on different things and you can then merge them together. It's just so beautiful how all of these things come together. Now, the one of the most important parts of taking the component-driven route is actually testing your components, at least unit tests. You might add integration tests, end-to-end tests, but unit tests are absolutely necessary. But why? Let's explore why. Uh, so in test-driven development or component-driven development, when you are given a task to, let's say, build a component, or you have an idea that I want to build this component, for the sake of an example, let's say it's a button. Okay, so the feature request is a button. Now you don't start out by writing the markup for the button. You don't start by writing the HTML or the JSX or TSX, whatever you are using. You start by writing the test. Now this might seem counterintuitive, but I'm sure it makes sense to folks who have used test driven development before. So when you first write tests, it will obviously fail because you don't have any source code. Like I said, you don't write the markup before the test. So your tests will fail. Now, of course, you want your test to pass. Okay, so now you go and write the markup. Then you receive the feedback from the test, whether your tests are passing or not. If your tests are still not passing, you obviously look at your code, check if everything is right. If you spot a mistake, correct it. And when your test finally passes, that's when you know that at least my component is working now. But that's not the end of the road. Now that you have a working solution, you clean your code, you refactor it, and get the feedback from the tests again. You see how in this cycle, one constant thing is the feedback from your test, and this is so important, and this can relieve your stress so much. I cannot stress this enough. uh, it is so important that you are getting feedback all the time, because that's the only way to objectively decide whether your component is behaving the way you want it to. Okay, let's move on. Now, there is a catch here. Since you are the one writing the test, I even mentioned this earlier, since you are the person writing the tests, you have to make sure the tests themselves are right. They have to make sense. Okay, if there are logical errors in your test, they can't help you. It's just as simple as that. So make sure that the tests you are writing make sense, they are logically correct, they are that you are testing the right things, and they are making the right assertions. So that's the most necessary thing to get started. So today I'll be giving you a little code example, and we'll be using like I'll be giving you a short example in which we'll be using these tools. So basically, starting from the left, we have TypeScript, I'm sure you know. Then there is Jest, Storybook, React, and testing library. Now let me introduce you to Storybook and testing library, since I guess not all people have heard of it. So yeah. So testing library is a testing utility for not just React, but for Vue.js and other frameworks too. And the important thing, or the pivotal idea about testing library, is that it allows you or even forces you to test your code for your so that it is optimized for your user. It does. You might have heard of Enzyme, which is Airbnb's tool. Enzyme allows you to test or make assertions on your components inner state. React testing library not only discourages you from doing that, it just simply does not allow you to do that. So how does it work is that instead of checking the component's internal state, it allows you to look at the actual DOM and make assertions there. Since your user will never see the internal state of the component, your user will only see what's on the DOM. You should make assertions from that. So yeah, I'm not going to go too much details here, but this is the core idea. Now let's talk about a storybook. So Storybook basically allows you to build your UIs in isolation. It allows you to basically assess your components individually, and even allows you to have different states from them. So like you can see here, there is a histogram component, and then there are three different states. There is a default, normalize, empty, and there are three. It will look different in all of those three states. So you can make changes in your code and actually see in real time how your component will behave under different circumstances. So this is Storybook and testing library are really good, and that's what I prefer when I'm writing UIs in React. So yeah, let's jump on into some code. So for this example, I'm using an image component, which is like a really basic image component, which will take a SRC and an alt text, and it will just render out an image. But not only that, we will handle the loading state of the image. So when the image is still loading, we don't want to display that ugly pixelated thing that browsers show. No, we don't want that. We will display a custom image. And let's say if the image crashes, basically the SRC we provide throws a 404 or anything, we don't want to show that pixelated browser thing. So we will also render a fallback in that case. So of course we will write the tests first, not the markup. As you can see, we don't have any markup right now. We'll start by writing the test. I'm using the React testing library. I won't go too much into details on in the syntax and stuff, because it's very easily readable. You'll see it's so intuitive. So the first test I want to do is just simply check if the component is being rendered correctly. So should render the image correctly. Now, we use this render method provided by testing library. TypeScript will complain right now because we don't have any markup. Let's just ignore it for now. That's, instead of doing this, we should do this. And not test.png. We don't want to throw an error. I have to import the photos src. By the way, I'm importing the src from this file because that's the only way I can show you that there is something loading, because if I use local images, it will just instantly load and there will be no point. Okay, so from this, we'll get this querying method called get by alt text. We will basically be querying the DOM based on the image's alt text. So let's get a reference to the image on our DOM. We'll do get by alt text. We pass in the alt. Now we expect our image to be in the document. See how readable it is. It's just amazing. And we expect. Now there's a little catch here. When you're using React testing library, especially when you're using images, you have to load the image manually. You have to fire the onload method, I guess it is, in JavaScript. So it might seem like this is pointless, but it will help us shortly. It will make sense soon why we are doing this. And only now we'll check the src is correct. Now, to make sure TypeScript doesn't complain, it's now happy. Okay, let's run the test. It should not pass. As expected, it fails because these props don't exist. Let's now write the markup so that our test passes. So we'll just be using, like I said, a simple image component, nothing too fancy. I'm just defining the props here. I'm using them here and just the standard stuff. And I'll just give them a bit of styling so that it doesn't take up my entire screen. Okay, let's see if the test passes now. Nice, it passes. So now we know that our image is actually showing the src we are passing to it and the alt we are passing to it. Look, for this we can even use something like snapshot tests, but I'm just using this as an example to like demonstrate how you use testing library. We passed the test, we wrote the markup, but we don't know what it looks like. That's where Storybook comes in. Look, Storybook has some weird syntax. You have to write stuff like this for each component you create, and then there's something called template. Even I'm not sure why you have to do that, but this is the standard syntax. If you follow that, you should be good. So okay, basically each thing you import from your story file is basically a story. A story is a UI state of your component. So our primary state obviously is going to be the, we don't have anything right now. So yeah, we are just passing src and all to it. Let's see how it looks. I'm already running the Storybook server. So we should be able to see how it looks. Okay, looks good. I mean, let's have a look again. Okay, looks good. Okay, and I mentioned earlier that we will be handling the loading and the error cases. So let's now write the test for that. This is where this thing will come in handy, the fire event. Because if you don't have that, you literally cannot test what happens before the image is loaded. So this comes in handy right now. Okay, so let's just call this should render the loader while the image is loading. And yeah, look, GitHub Copilot does everything for you. You don't even have to do anything. Wow. So basically it's the same as this. You just render the image, you get a reference to the image. The only thing we are going to do differently is that we'll be making an assertion on the SRC of the image before we load it. So we'll be checking if this is indeed the loading SRC. And after we load it, we'll be making an assertion on whether it's the SRC we actually passed. Let's now try running the test. It should fail because we have not written the logic to handle the loading. Okay, it fails like you expect. Okay, now let's integrate the loading state here. Just going to do a simple use state, set loading react.useState. We'll be defaulting this to true, and when the image loads, we want to set loading to false. Now we have to change the SRC dynamically. So when it is loading, we want to show the loading SRC. When it's not loading, we want to show the SRC we actually passed in. Okay, now let's run the test. They pass. Great. Now let's see it in action in Storybook. This is the loading SRC that we have passed, and this is the image. Great. So now let's handle the error. What if we pass SRC which doesn't exist? It will just throw ugly, no, just a standard browser error right now. So let's write a test for that case. Actually, I'm just gonna copy this because it's literally the same thing. Should render the fallback if there is an error. Simple enough. Yeah, let's pass something that breaks it. Doesn't really matter because we will be manually breaking it anyways. So instead of doing this, we'll be firing the error event. Can actually fire the load event too, and then we'll be firing the error event, and we should check if the SRC is indeed the fallback SRC. The test should fail, and it does. Now let's integrate the error functionality here. We'll add another state, and we'll set it to true when there is an error. And we want to render the SRC again dynamically. If there is an error, we want to show the fallback SRC. If there is not an error, then the standard stuff. Okay, let's see. Do the tests pass? Yes, they do. So We still haven't seen it in action, so let's add a story for this. We'll add const error. We'll call this story an error. It's a standard syntax, and we pass in the arguments. We pass something that breaks it, so a hash and an alt error. Okay, uh, there we go. That's the fallback src that I passed. It's great. This allows us to, you know, uh, make sure that whenever we, let's say, pass a huge file, our component will indeed show a loader. And when we pass something that doesn't exist or isn't even a source, it shows a fallback. Now, of course, in production, you don't want to use these funny SRCs, but you get the point. So yeah, so basically what I want to reiterate on is that writing tests allowed us to get constant feedback. It's a different thing that we pass all our tests in one go. This will never happen in a real scenario, because I have been there. The unit tests never pass on the first go. I have done this like 5 times, so that's why all of them are passing. So it will really come in handy when you are, you know, stuck in a problem and you just don't understand where it's coming from. You can just easily trace which one is breaking what. And yeah, it gives you confidence that my image component looks good when it's in a primary state. It looks good when it's in an error state, and you can add more and more and more, and you can make assertions on its styling. You can even make an assertion on its src. We haven't done that, so why don't we do that? Expect. And GitHub Copilot will help you. You don't even have to remember all of this. It just does it all on its own. Just write a good prompt and it will just handle it. It passes, everything is good. Okay, so these are the references that I used. Both of them are my content. The first one is a repo. It contains the starter code for the example I showed. So if you are interested in maybe trying this yourself, you can clone it and have a look. And I wrote an article about the very same topic. If you want to, if you are into articles, you can check that out. And yeah, let's connect on Twitter if you like this talk. I tweet about tech and I'm kind. So let's be friends. And yeah, thank you. If you have any questions, make sure to let me know.
Nice talk, Devat. Really good.
Thanks,
Uh,
Kiran.
so let's see if we have any questions.
Yeah, Ravi, you can run it in the watch mode too. But sometimes it bugs out. It doesn't change the result even if you change your test code. So that's why I prefer to just run it every time.
Uh, yeah, I think we don't have any questions yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think the links provided by Devat are really good. So you can go through them, and if you have any questions, you can reach out to Devat directly on Twitter. Uh,
Yeah, definitely.
yeah, thanks, Devat, again. Uh,
Thanks, Kiran. I really appreciate this opportunity. This is my first one, so yeah, I really appreciate.
yeah, you did really good job.
Thanks.
Um, Yeah, I think so. That's all the talks we have for today. Um, we'll wrap up the meetup then. We will see you all in the next meetup in the next month. Once again, thanks to all the speakers for sharing their insights. Really helpful. Um, yeah, we'll catch up again in the next meetup. Bye.
See you, Kiran. Bye.